We're going to stay with solar and power issues. President Cyril Ramaphosa says addressing the energy crisis will help revive South Africa's struggling economy. Business and consumer confidence have receded over the past few years due to the ongoing crippling power cuts. And to find out if business is satisfied with Ramaphosa's measures to boost the economy, I'm joined by Frank Blackmore, who is a lead economist at the firm KPMG, joining us from Pretoria, Tshwane this afternoon. Mr. Blackmore, let's start in broad strokes. Your overall view of the President's State of the Nation address, listening with the ears of an economist at KPMG.
Sure. So my expectations prior to the SONA was that this might actually just be a sort of single-issue SONA. I think everyone who lives in this country knows that the energy crisis was going to be top of mind, and we also wanted that to be probably central to the SONA. And to be fair, the President started the SONA in that regard. He gave some consideration to the broader issues that are impacting the country, the unemployment, the crime, the SOEs, etc. But then he went into, which was the primary issue to be expected, and that was the energy crisis. However, after he had touched on the energy crisis, every other issue from the past, 3-4 SONAs was thrown in the mix as well. And in a way, I think that diluted the effectiveness of the SONA.
So have a look. You've got a 2021 economic outlook for South Africa. Will you be revising your economic outlook for the country based on what you've heard from the President as KPMG?
We've already revised our outlook for the next few years based on the fact that, the news that came out that the load shedding is going to be continuous over the next 12 to 24 months at least. And also that the sort of stages may vary. We didn't stick to the stage 2 and 3 provided by Eskom. We also assumed that some of the higher stages will probably come in over the next few years. So we have, and basically it's taken around 2 percentage points of our growth. So where we could have grown around 2% or just above, now we see growth over the next few years under 1%.
Jeepers. I mean, in percentage points, that is quite something to digest. How hard of a sell is it, when you're providing advice to potential clients looking to expand business or reconfigure their business in South Africa, considering the load shedding that we've had, the plans Eskom's put forward, the idea that we might have some clarity on sort of stable load shedding schedules into the next year or two and then having that pulled back? I mean, how does one possibly sell South Africa as a business and investment destination?
Well, there are a number of considerations here. I think, the most important is entrepreneurs, investors, or risk takers. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in this game. They are banking on the return over a longer period of time, and knowing that perhaps the energy as well as other issues in South Africa are what they are, you will act accordingly. So the supply of energy only becomes an unknown factor or a risk which you need to control and take into your business plans to invest. And we see that although perhaps some investment has slowed, there is still investment taking place in our country. But I think firms, the private sector knows that they'll probably have to deal with these issues by themselves and not rely on government to supply these issues.
So if we park the power issue, what 2 or 3 other issues in terms of overall governance in South Africa do you think are most hampering to attracting business investors? Is it things like rail infrastructure or the lack thereof, issues at ports in terms of some of the problems we've seen around Richards Bay, for example, in the last year? Where are the 3 weak points, 2 or 3 weak points, you would say, beyond energy when it comes to business in South Africa and economic growth?
Sure. I think they're in the same, let me say the first one will be in the same categories as electricity, and that would be general state of infrastructure. Remember, the private sector is able to do what the private sector does, employ people, earn foreign exchange, and pay taxes, as long as the infrastructure of the economy is working. And we know there's several failures, as you mentioned, ports, rail, to a certain degree, roads, water. These all need special attention by the government. I think then a longer-term issue that needs to be addressed is just the quality of education and the opportunities provided for the youth based on that education. And education should provide people the opportunity to take part in the economy. And at this point in time, I feel there are failures in that regard as well. And then overarching issues such as safety and security, as well as health. You know, from a private sector perspective as well as public, you need people to be healthy and you need people to feel safe in order to do business. So, you know, those would be probably the three areas I'd focus on. Getting the SOEs right, getting infrastructure right, focusing on education, as well as the public services such as, you know, health and safety and security.
Three crisp points and well presented, I would say, Mr. Blackmore. Interesting, we had Dr. Ntsikelelo Breakfast on earlier from Gqeberha talking about SONA in anticipation of what he's expecting or looking forward to hearing when it comes to the budget speech. And I'd like to sort of piggyback on that point he emphasized to ask you, working in the sector that you do, we've had SONA, it sort of sets the scene in some ways, and there was certainly a lot of color at points at the beginning of it yesterday. What will you be looking for, particularly as someone from your sector and profession, when it comes to the budget speech in 2 weeks' time?
Well, a lot was said yesterday about these initiatives in all aspects, some of the ones that I've mentioned as well, education, health, SOEs, etc. We'll be looking for where the money is going to be spent. And if the finance minister can illustrate that, that's the next phase in implementation. That at least says, one, we have issues or initiatives we want to roll out. Secondly, we have the budget for it and we've put that aside. And then obviously the emphasis will go to implementation of those. But at least if the money is where the SONA was speaking, that gives us some confidence that things will be done.
Frank Blackmore there from Pretoria, Tshwane this afternoon, lead economist at KPMG. Thank you for that input.